Hello and welcome to the Crone Zone. We're back again, and this time we're looking at the fives. Yes, and Chubbs is here yet again with us. Hello, darling. Go on. So, last lesson we were looking at the fours, and we found that the fours brought stability, structure, consolidation, a resting place, a sense of plateauing, a place to rest a while, a place to be secure a while. But of course, nothing can progress too long from a position of stasis. And along come the fives, and the fives disrupt the equilibrium of the fours. And so the word I want to give you for the fives is not a popular word, but here it comes. It's conflict. So when the stable fours are disrupted, often by a conflicting event, then we push on through that in order to grow and to develop. Because, of course, the four is quite an early number. We're by no means done at the four, and we wouldn't want to ossify and just stay there. So let's look at the cards we need today for you to annotate, stick, right on and mark so that you have those pegs on the actual cards. So you need card number 5 from the major arcana, which is this one, the Hierophant. You will need card number 5 from Swords, card number 5 from Wands, card 5 from the Cups, and card 5 from the Pentacles. So if you haven't already got those out, you might want to pause at this point and take those out of the deck. So let's look at card number 5, the Hierophant, from the major arcana. And at first glance, it's not immediately evident why this card would have anything to do with conflict, really. So we'll be unpacking that and exploring how that connection is made. This card is actually ruled by, or it's associated, not ruled by, it's associated with the sign of Taurus, which is a very stable, fixed earth sign. And Taurus itself is ruled by the planet Venus. Now, we saw Venus as the planet ascribed to the Empress card. And we saw then that the qualities of beauty and love and creativity and growth were there from Venus. But there's another aspect of Venus that is embedded here and quite aligned to the sign of Taurus. And that's to do with values, what we value. And this is where the potential conflict can come in. Because what we value, we tend to protect and to defend. So let's look in a little more detail then at the Hierophant. There's a very traditional representation of the Hierophant. He is shown as a pope-like figure and he holds authority. It's interesting to compare this card to the High Priestess. He is raised up on a dais and dressed to impress, as you see, his red robes. As with her, he is seated between the pillars of the temple, but you can't help but notice what a very solid, earthy temple this is. And those waters of intuition that we saw so clearly with the priestess aren't here. He leads an institution. We can see this because of the priests below him, and that's significant. He is raised up above other people, he was coming from on high, with his hand raised in blessing, in the belief that blessings are his to bestow. The Empress tells us to look within, but the Hierophant speaks to the opposite of looking to the institutions of society, such as the church and education, to inform us. He holds the keys and we must go through him. So the Hierophant is a conduit, a channel by which we receive information. He is a mediator of information, of cultural information. And the archetype operates in whatever social context we find ourselves in. So he might be a pope. It's just as easily be a high priest or a witch doctor, a shaman or a guru. Whatever, the Hierophant is transmitting the beliefs of society, whatever that society is. So he's very much an agent of the orthodox values of a given society. So for us, these may be to do with the church, education, etc. He's representing social institutions. I've just put in here, not the legal system though. The justice card has that role. But the laws and codes of society, and the moral codes, if you like, the ritual codes that we are expected to observe. These are the values of the overculture we live in. So here we are, back to this idea of values. In the past, the role of the church was stronger in society than it is in the modern day. And the Hierophant is very much that controlling and informing role of the church as counsellor, advisor, and authority in moral matters. And to this day, in a reading, we can still see a very strong connection with orthodox church going, in the sense that it can be a signifier of weddings, funerals, baptisms, bar mitzvahs, whatever can come under the Hierophant. But because our range from whence we take advice has grown significantly, the Hierophant in a modern reading could also be someone like a psychotherapist or a general therapist of any kind, a counsellor, someone at the Samaritans, a person who is advising us from Citizens Advice Bureau, a respected teacher of some subject. Any of those possibilities is there when we see the Hierophant. So although the Hierophant can reflect aspects of a culture which can be a bit oppressive sometimes, and with which the individual can feel themselves in conflict, can feel rather oppressed by expectations of a society, that can be a negative aspect of the Hierophant. But there are also many positive and helpful aspects that are there too, and it doesn't do to forget those. But let's turn now and look at how the connections to be made between the Hierophant and how the conflicts express themselves in the four suits of the minor arcana. A sense of conflict is instantly evident in this card. So note, for instance, the troubled waters in the background and those jagged, edgy clouds. By the water, a figure is weeping in the background, and another crestfallen figure is also retreating towards the water. Two vanquished swords lie on the ground. They have been dropped and surrendered. And in the foreground, a figure stands with two swords over his shoulder and a third captured sword at his side. He has the wind in his hair. It's almost indicative of just coming out of action, hot from action. And he victoriously watches the retreat of his enemies. In fact, he appears to smile in satisfaction at their downfall. With swords, air, we're dealing with the realm of ideas, beliefs, words and communication. And of course, under that umbrella will also come verbal arguments. It's easy to see from the world around us how conflict flares up when there are clashes of belief, when one person's views invade the boundaries of another's values. There can be intolerance, bigotry, even the possibility of fanaticism. If this card appeared with others that double down on that meaning, that could be there. Wars and conflicts have abounded on these issues of transgression of other people's boundaries, often cultural, social boundaries, religious boundaries, big time. This card can represent the need to crush the opposition at any cost. I think of the House of Commons. No attack on the opponent is too low. There's an element to this card at win at any cost. Of course, the situation can be smaller scale, and it doesn't have to be a larger social arena. Just as easily, it could represent bloody-mindedness, our own or that of other people, bullying, our own bullying or our experience of bullying energies. Could be in work situations, family situations, peer groups. At its most positive, and there is always a positive, this card could signify laying down a personal boundary, which is not necessarily a bad thing. This could, if other things went with it, indicate the good fight. The Five of Wands also shows a clash. We see a group of people, 5 people, and their wands are sort of like quarterstaff fighting, they're striking against each other. But the Five of Wands presents potentially as a more playful energy. You note the background is rather different from the previous card. There's a bright blue background. And to me, the postures of the figures are not really aggressive. Their looks are a little unsure, but they show engagement. What we have here seems more of a testing out in the field, allowing a mutual interplay rather than closed opposition. The participants look young and the process more game than earnest. But it does seem a call to test out your plans, test out your projects. Just put them to the test and see how they do when they're meeting opposition and counter views. How does that look? So I think in some ways there's an element of the young people here, and they do appear to be quite young, being quite like puppies and kittens, trying out their strength by playing together. But there's, as with puppy and kitten play, there's an element of real learning there. So this is a card of initial testing, healthy conflict of ideas. But like play, it's not really leading anywhere precisely. But you are getting out there on the court and engaging with the opposition and maybe learning as you do so. The message here, I think, is challenge can be good. It can strengthen you. I think if there's a caution with this card, it's that it can signify a lack of focus. There's not enough direction of energy in it. Could even be a signifier of wasted energy. Just one look at the Five of Cup cards and it's clear this is a card of disappointment. A disrupting energy has upturned 3 of the 5 cups, and this sad, forlorn figure bows its head in contemplation of the loss. Note that there's a cloak of black depression draped around the character here. And he gazes at the 3 cups on the ground in abject, just dejection. Now, meanwhile, 2 cups remain upright, but the figure chooses not to regard them. Just as he is not engaged with the river flowing by the bridge, and the fact that he could cross that bridge and move on to better places. This is deep, deep disappointment. But there's also an element here, to me, of crying over spilt milk. Yes, there's a real and genuine sense of loss, and it may cut very deep. But there are better things ahead. And the only practical thing to do, the positive thing to do, is to count the blessing of the 2 cups which remain, follow the river to the bridge, and cross over to your better future. So I think the message here is stop dwelling on your losses and your pain. It's fixing you to the spot. It's sometimes been the case that the 5 of Pentacles has come up in a reading and people have said, like, oh yeah, bankruptcy is imminent, or oh yeah, you're going to have a collapse in your health, or you're going to become impoverished and hardship is ahead. Well, those traditional meanings can sometimes be read from this card, but I see it as being about quite a bit more than that, actually. So if we look at it, we see 2 very sorry figures, outcast from the warmth of the church they're passing. And for me, I always have a sense of over-the-top bathos about the card. Not only are the figures disabled, ragged, excluded, shut out from the light of the church window, it's snowing as well, There's something that reminds me of Charlie Chaplin's Tramp, sweeping the snow outside, pressing his face against the window pane of a warm lighted room. And my take on this card, how I found it to be, is that more often than being an indicator of real woes and financial and health hardships necessarily, it can be a card of perceived hardship, a feeling hard done by, often a sense of being socially rejected, a poverty mindset, maybe even poor little me, So this can be a fear of being outside the pale, amongst the rejected and the desolate, socially outcast. And I suppose it could be that we fear if we move outside of the authority of orthodoxy, we should be cast adrift and our survival will be threatened. There's another interpretation I just want to mention here as well, and that is that there can be a poverty of mind where the world is reduced to materialism. So we're shut off from spirit, believing that this world is all that there is, and there is no wellspring of the spirit to feed us. That's the 5s then. They can be tricky. That conflict leads to change. And change, disturbing as it can feel, can be extremely positive, and it can be just what we need to grow and move on to much better things. But there's no doubt that if we're experiencing the conflicts of thought or belief, as we might with swords or wands, or conflicted emotions, as we see with cups and with pentacles, they can be difficult times to go through. And the Hierophant is both a helper and potentially a hindrance. I mean, although the Hierophant can be thou shalt and thou shalt not and that kind of voice, let's not forget that in times of trouble, people often turn to the faith of their childhood. Um, in troubled times, there can be great solace to be found in the rituals of organized religion of any kind. That can be a great comfort to people. And also when we're going through dodgy patches, difficult times, then let's seek advice when we need it. Advice can be out there. There can be people who can mediate to us what we need to hear. And we mustn't be afraid of seeking that advice. And sometimes that's what the Hierophant indicates. But let's not be frightened by the fives. Five is only halfway through the cycle. It's not the end of the story. Once we move beyond five, we can go forward and access some of the riches that are waiting for us a little later in the cycle. Okay, well, that's today. I hope that's been useful. I hope you've been annotating your cards, or that you will be doing that shortly. Please give me some comments or questions below. It's good to know I'm not sort of speaking into the void. That would be very nice to have some kind of feedback coming in. Okay, thanks for being here today. Thank you for your time, and I will see you next time. Bye now.